The Velanthi Empire had a problem. Their soldiers had become soft. For 300 years, the Empire had known nothing but peace. Their warriors trained in beautiful crystal halls, learned ancient sword dances, and wore armor that sparkled like jewels. They looked magnificent in parades. They bowed perfectly before the Emperor. But they had never fought a real battle. They had never bled. They had never known true pain. Now, the Kethra Dominion was attacking their borders. Small raids at first, testing their defenses. The Velanthi soldiers sent to stop them had failed badly. Some had fainted at the sight of enemy weapons. Others had surrendered before a single shot was fired. One squad had retreated because the battlefield was too hot for their comfort. The Emperor called his advisors together in the great throne room. The crystal walls reflected their worried faces 1,000 times over. "We need help," the Emperor said. His voice was heavy with shame. "Our warriors have forgotten how to fight." The advisors discussed many options. They could hire mercenaries, but mercenaries had no loyalty. They could buy better weapons, but weapons meant nothing in weak hands. Finally, one advisor suggested something different. "The humans," she said. "They are known throughout the galaxy as trainers. They come from a death world where everything tries to kill them. Perhaps they could teach our soldiers to be strong," the Emperor agreed. A message was sent to Earth, requesting a human trainer. The message was very specific. It asked for someone gentle and patient, someone who understood that Velanthi were sensitive creatures with delicate bodies, someone who could slowly and carefully help their soldiers, improve without causing them distress. The message traveled across the stars. It passed through many offices and departments. Somewhere along the way, a clerk made a small mistake. Instead of going to the Diplomatic Training Corps, the message went to the Deathworld Integration Program. This was a department that trained humans to survive on the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. They read the request. They saw that aliens needed a trainer. They sent their best. Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez stepped off the transport ship on a bright morning. 3 suns hung in the purple sky of the Velanthi homeworld. The air smelled like flowers and honey. The temperature was perfect. Vasquez had spent the last 5 years training humans to survive on planets with acid rain, extreme gravity, and predators that could smell fear. This place felt like a vacation resort. She was 43 years old. Her skin was dark brown, marked with scars from a lifetime of training accidents, combat exercises, and one memorable encounter with a creature called a Terran honey badger. Her hair was cut short and practical. Her eyes were the color of coffee, and they missed nothing. 100 Velanthi soldiers stood in perfect formation to greet her. They were tall and slender, with scales that shimmered in shades of blue and silver. Each one had 4 eyes that blinked in sequence. Their ceremonial armor caught the light of 3 suns and scattered rainbows across the landing pad. They were beautiful. They were elegant. They looked like they would break if someone sneezed too hard near them. Vasquez studied them for a long moment. Then she smiled. Lord Selleck stepped forward. He was the commander of the Silk Caste, the Emperor's elite guard. His scales were deep purple, a sign of noble blood. He bowed gracefully. "Welcome, honored trainer," he said through his translator. "We are grateful for your gentle guidance. Our soldiers are eager to learn, though we must warn you that they require careful handling. The Velanthi body is quite sensitive, and we hope you will be patient with our limitations." Vasquez nodded slowly. She walked along the line of soldiers, looking at each one. One soldier trembled as she passed. Another closed all 4 eyes, as if her gaze was too intense to bear. "I was told you need to learn how to survive," Vasquez said. Her translator turned her words into musical Velanthi sounds, but somehow they still felt sharp. "We start tomorrow. 5 in the morning. Do not eat breakfast." Lord Selleck's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. "I am sorry, honored trainer. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. We requested a gentle approach. Our soldiers are not accustomed to harsh treatment." "I understand," Vasquez said. She did not change her instructions. That evening, Lord Selleck reviewed Elena Vasquez's file with growing horror. She had trained humans to survive on Kepler-4 for to be a planet where the gravity was strong enough to crush bones. She had led expeditions to worlds with no breathable air, toxic water, and temperatures that could freeze blood in seconds. Her specialty was teaching people to push past the point where their bodies told them to stop. The Valanthi had asked for a yoga instructor. They had received a woman who once ran 50 kilometers through a desert just to prove a point to a student, who said he was too tired to continue. Lord Selix immediately sent a message to the transport company. The next ship leaving the system would not arrive for 3 weeks. He sent a message to Earth requesting a replacement. The reply informed him that Master Sergeant Vasquez's contract was binding for 6 standard months. She could not be reassigned without her consent. He went to Vasquez's quarters to explain the situation. "There has been a mistake," he said politely. "You are not the trainer we requested. We need someone more gentle. Surely you understand." Vasquez listened carefully. When he finished, she nodded. "I understand completely," she said. "But I am here now. My contract is valid, and your soldiers need training. We can wait 3 weeks for another ship, then wait 3 more weeks for a replacement trainer. Or we can start tomorrow and see what your soldiers are truly capable of." Lord Selix did not know how to respond. In 300 years of peace, no one had ever refused to accommodate Valanthi wishes. "Your soldiers are afraid," Vasquez continued. Her voice was not cruel, but it was firm. "They have never been tested. They do not know their own strength, because no one has ever asked them to find it. I am going to ask." That night, 17 silk-cast soldiers requested transfers to other units. They had seen the look in the humans' eyes. They had heard stories about Deathworlds and the creatures that lived on them. They wanted no part of whatever was coming. Their requests were denied. At exactly 5 in the morning, Vasquez walked onto the training field. 100 soldiers stood waiting, their scales dull with anxiety. The 3 suns had not yet risen. The air was cool and still. Vasquez looked at them for a long moment. Some stood tall, trying to appear brave. Others could not hide their fear. One soldier in the back row looked like he might be sick. "Today," Vasquez said calmly, "you begin to learn what you are made of. I will not lie to you. This will be difficult. This will be uncomfortable. Some of you will want to quit, but I promise you this. When we are finished, you will not be the same soldiers you are today. You will be better. You will be stronger. You will be ready." She paused, letting her words sink in. Now she said, "We run." The silk cast had never run before. Not really. They were about to learn. The first week was a disaster. Vasquez told them to run, and they ran. For exactly 90 seconds. Then the first soldier collapsed. Then another. Then 5 more. Within 3 minutes, half the silk cast was lying on the ground, gasping for air. Their scales fading to a pale gray that meant extreme distress. Vasquez watched without expression. She had trained humans who complained about 10-kilometer runs. She had trained colonists who thought 3 hours of sleep was not enough. She had never trained anyone who could not run for 2 minutes. She did not yell. She did not mock them. She simply waited until they could breathe again, then told them to walk instead. They walked for 30 minutes before the first soldier complained that his legs were tired. On the second day, she asked them to do push-ups. Private Kethvos, a young soldier with pale blue scales, managed to lower himself to the ground. When he tried to push himself back up, there was a soft cracking sound. He screamed. His arm had broken. The medical team rushed in. Lord Selix demanded an end to the training. Vasquez asked to see the medical report. The Valanthi doctor explained that their species had evolved on a paradise world. Low gravity. No predators. Abundant food. Their bones were crystalline and beautiful, but they had never needed to bear heavy weight. Their muscles were designed for gentle movements, not strenuous activity. Their hearts could not pump blood quickly for extended periods. In simple terms, the doctor said, our bodies were never built for struggle. We never needed strength because nothing on our world required it. Vasquez listened carefully. She asked many questions. She requested complete biological data on Valanthia physiology. She spent 2 days studying their limits, their weaknesses, their potential. Then she redesigned everything. The new training program was unlike anything in the galaxy. It was not brutal in the way human military training was brutal. There were no long marches, no heavy weights, no extreme obstacles. Instead, it was relentless in small ways. Every day, the soldiers did a little more than the day before. Every session pushed them just slightly past their comfort zone. Vasquez learned that Valenthi bones grew stronger when stressed, just like human bones. They simply had never been stressed before. She created exercises that put gentle pressure on their skeletal structure, building density slowly over time. She learned that their hearts could adapt to sustained effort if the effort was increased gradually. She designed running programs that added just 10 seconds per day. The soldiers still suffered. They were always tired. Their muscles always ached. But they stopped breaking. More importantly, Vasquez changed how they thought about pain. On my world, she told them one evening after training, there is a creature called the salmon. It is a fish. Every year, this fish swims upstream against powerful currents. It leaps over waterfalls. It fights against the water until its body is torn and bleeding. Many salmon die before reaching their destination. The ones who survive do so because they simply refuse to stop. Private Kethvos, his arm now healed and wrapped in a support brace, raised his hand. Why do they do this? Why not swim in easier water? Because the place they need to reach is upstream, Vasquez said. The easy water leads nowhere. The salmon understands something that your species has never had to learn. Sometimes the only path forward is through difficulty. She paused, looking at their confused faces. You have lived in easy water for 300 years. Now enemies are coming from upstream. You can stay where you are and be swept away, or you can learn to swim against the current. The soldiers did not fully understand, but something in her words stayed with them. By the end of week 2, Kethvos attempted push-ups again. His arm trembled. His whole body shook. But he completed one, then another. By the time he collapsed, he had done 3.3 push-ups. It was nothing by human standards. Vasquez had seen human children do 50 without stopping. But 3 was 3 more than 0. 3 was progress. She knelt beside him on the training ground. His scales were gray with exhaustion. His 4 eyes could barely focus. Good, she said quietly. Tomorrow, you will do 4. I cannot, he gasped. It is impossible. You said 1 was impossible? Then you did 3. She helped him sit up. Your body has more strength than your mind believes. My job is to teach you to find it. Word of the training spread through the palace. Nobles whispered about the strange human who was torturing the silk caste. Physicians warned of permanent damage. Traditional military leaders said that the ancient Valenthi ways were being destroyed. Lord Selix brought these concerns to the emperor. He requested that Vasquez be removed from her position, even if it meant breaking the contract and paying penalties. The emperor summoned Vasquez to the throne room. She stood before the crystal throne, a small human figure surrounded by towering Valenthi nobles. The emperor studied her with all 4 eyes. My advisors tell me you are harming our soldiers, the emperor said. They say your methods are dangerous and disrespectful to our traditions. Lord Selix has formally requested your removal. What do you say to this? Vasquez bowed respectfully. Then she held up a small datapad. Your Majesty, when I arrived, your soldiers could not run for 2 minutes. Today they can run for 15. When I arrived, Private Kethvos could not do 1 push-up. He broke his arm, trying. Today his arm is healed, and he can do 12 push-ups without stopping. She let that number hang in the air. 12, Your Majesty. In 14 days, I have made your weakest soldier 12 times stronger than he was before. In 14 more days, he will be stronger still, and the soldier next to him, and the next, and every soldier in the silk caste. The emperor looked at the data. He looked at Vasquez. He looked at Lord Selix. Is this true? He asked. Lord Selix hesitated. He had seen the training sessions. He had seen the soldiers running farther, pushing harder, recovering faster. He had seen something in their eyes that had not been there before. Something that looked almost like confidence. "It is true," he admitted quietly. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. The crystal walls reflected his thoughtful expression 1,000 times. "Master Sergeant Vasquez," he finally said, "you will continue your work. Lord Selix will cooperate fully. Any who interfere with the training will answer to me personally." Vasquez bowed again. "Thank you, Your Majesty." As she left the throne room, she passed Lord Selix. He was staring at her with a mixture of resentment and grudging respect. "I still believe your methods are too harsh," he said. "You are entitled to that belief," Vasquez replied. "But your soldiers are entitled to survive. When the Kethra come in force, and they will come, would you rather have warriors who are comfortable or warriors who are ready?" She did not wait for an answer. The next morning, training resumed. No one requested transfers anymore. No one complained about the difficulty. Something had changed in the Silk caste. They had seen Vasquez stand before the Emperor and defend them. They had heard her speak of their progress with pride. For the first time in 300 years, someone expected them to be strong. And slowly, painfully, they were beginning to believe that maybe they could be. Private Kethfos finished his morning run and collapsed on the training ground, next to his squad mates. Every part of him ached. His lungs burned. His legs felt like water, but he had run for 16 minutes today. Yesterday it had been 15. Tomorrow it would be 17. He looked up at the 3 suns rising in the purple sky and smiled. 3 months passed, and the Silk caste became something new. The soldiers who had once fainted at minor cuts now dressed their own wounds without flinching. They had learned a phrase that Vasquez repeated often: "Pain is information. It tells you something is wrong. It does not tell you to give up. It does not tell you to stop. It is just data, and data can be managed." Private Kethfos could now do 40 push-ups. His arms, once thin and fragile, showed visible muscle definition. The palace physicians wrote research papers about this change. In 300 years of medical records, no Volanthi had ever developed muscles that could be seen beneath their scales. It was considered biologically impossible. Kethfos had made it possible. The soldiers could run for 30 minutes without stopping. Their crystalline bones had grown denser and stronger. Their hearts pumped blood with an efficiency that their ancestors would not have recognized. When they sparred with practice weapons, they moved with speed and purpose instead of elegant hesitation, but the greatest change was in their minds. Vasquez had taught them a concept she called being comfortable with discomfort. It meant accepting that struggle was normal. It meant understanding that fatigue was not a reason to stop. It meant pushing forward when every part of your body screamed for rest. On Earth, she told them during an evening lecture, humans invented something called the marathon. It is a race where people run 42 kilometers without stopping. They do this voluntarily. They pay money to do it. They train for months just for the privilege of suffering for hours. The soldiers stared at her in disbelief. "Why?" asked Lord Selix, who now attended training sessions as an observer. "Why would anyone choose to suffer?" "Because suffering makes you discover who you really are," Vasquez said. "Anyone can be strong when things are easy. The marathon shows you what you are made of when things are hard, and that knowledge changes you forever." She paused, looking at the 100 soldiers who had once been afraid of running for 2 minutes. "You have all run your own marathons these past 3 months. You have discovered that you are capable of far more than you believed. The limits you thought were real were just stories you told yourselves. Your bodies always had this strength. Your minds just needed permission to use it." Kethfos thought about this often. He remembered his first day when he had broken his arm doing a single push-up. He remembered believing with absolute certainty that he could never be a real warrior. That belief had felt like truth. It had felt like a wall that could never be climbed, but it had been just a story. And Vasquez had helped him write a new one. Word of the transformation spread across the empire. Other military units sent observers to watch the Silk caste train. Noble families, seeing the changes in their sons and daughters, began morning exercise routines of their own. The phrase Vasquez Standard entered everyday language. It meant pushing beyond what seemed possible. Vasquez herself remained focused. She knew that physical strength was only part of the equation. Real warriors needed mental toughness. They needed to function under pressure. They needed to think clearly when everything around them was chaos. She began introducing stress drills. Soldiers would be woken in the middle of the night and told to assemble in full armor. They would train in artificial darkness, learning to rely on senses other than sight. They would practice making decisions with incomplete information, learning to act even when they were uncertain. In battle, Vasquez explained, you will never have enough time. You will never have enough information. You will never feel ready. The enemy does not wait for you to be comfortable. You must learn to act anyway. Lord Sellex watched a night drill from the observation platform. The soldiers moved through a simulated combat scenario, therefore eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. They communicated in whispers. They covered each other's movements. They looked like actual warriors. I was wrong about you, he said quietly to Vasquez. She stood beside him. Her arms crossed, her eyes tracking every soldier. You were not wrong. You were just thinking about the wrong things. You were worried about tradition, about comfort, about doing things the way they had always been done. And what were you thinking about? Survival, she said simply. When the Kethra come, tradition will not protect your soldiers. Comfort will not save them. Only strength and training and the will to keep fighting when everything seems lost. That is what I was thinking about. Lord Sellex nodded slowly. He had spent his whole life protecting the old ways. Now he understood that some ways needed to change. The Emperor has received intelligence reports, he said. The Kethra are gathering forces near our agricultural moon. We believe an attack is coming soon. Vasquez did not seem surprised. How soon? Weeks, perhaps days. We do not know for certain. Then we train harder. She turned to face him directly. Your soldiers are ready, Lord Sellex. Not perfect, not invincible, but ready. They will not run. They will not surrender. They will fight. How can you be so certain? Vasquez smiled slightly. It was not her frightening smile. It was something warmer. Because I have seen them become something new. 3 months ago, they would have collapsed after 90 seconds of running. Today, they can march for hours. 3 months ago, they fainted at the sight of blood. Today, they bandage wounds without hesitation. They have already proven what they are capable of. The battle will just confirm it. 3 days later, the attack came. A Kethra strike force descended on the agricultural moon without warning. 300 shock troops, armed with plasma weapons and powered armor, expecting to sweep through the small garrison in minutes. The garrison consisted of 80 silk cast soldiers. Among them were Lord Sellex and Private Kethvos. And standing beside them, checking her weapon with practiced ease, was Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez. The Kethra landing craft touched down at the edge of the agricultural complex. The shock troops poured out, moving in practiced formations. They had fought Valenthi before. They expected the defenders to panic, to flee, to surrender. They did not expect what they found. The silk cast was waiting for them. They stood in defensive positions, weapons raised, scales hardened with determination. No one trembled. No one ran. No one looked away from the approaching enemy. Vasquez moved among them, speaking calmly. Remember your training. Remember what you have become. Pain is just information. Fear is just a feeling. They cannot hurt you if you do not let them. Kethvos gripped his weapon tightly. His heart was pounding. His 4 eyes tracked the Kethra advance. Every instinct told him to run, to hide, to survive. But he had learned new instincts over the past 3 months. He had learned that fear did not have to control him. He had learned that his body could endure far more than his mind believed. The first plasma bolt scorched the air above his head. The battle had begun. And for the first time in 300 years, the Valenthia did not run. The battle should have been a massacre. 300 Kethra shock troops against 80 Valenthia defenders. The numbers were not even close. The Kethra had better weapons, heavier armor, and centuries of combat experience. They had conquered a dozen worlds. They had never lost a ground engagement. They expected this fight to last minutes. The first wave of Kethra charged the Valanthi defensive line. They were massive creatures, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick brown scales that could stop most weapons. Their eyes burned with confidence. They had fought Valanthi before. Those fights had been embarrassingly easy, but these Valanthi did not break. The defenders held their positions, firing in coordinated patterns that Vasquez had drilled into them over months of training. When one soldier reloaded, the soldier beside them covered the gap. When plasma fire came too close, they dropped to cover without panic. They moved like a machine with many parts, each part knowing its role. The first Kethra fell, then another, then 5 more. The shock troops hesitated. This was not how Valanthi were supposed to fight. They were supposed to run. They were supposed to cry and beg and surrender. They were not supposed to stand firm and return fire. Vasquez moved through the defensive line, not as a commander giving orders, but as a soldier fighting alongside them. A plasma bolt grazed her shoulder, burning through her uniform and leaving a streak of charred skin beneath. She did not scream. She did not stop. She adjusted her stance, aimed carefully, and took down the Kethra who had shot her. The soldiers saw this. They saw their human trainer take a wound that would have sent any Valanthi into shock and simply continue fighting. They understood in that moment what she had been trying to teach them all along. Pain was information. It did not mean the end. It meant you were still alive, still fighting, still in the battle. Private Kethvos fired from behind a storage container, his 4 eyes tracking multiple targets. His arms ached from holding his weapon. His legs trembled from crouching. Everything in his body wanted to rest. He remembered Vasquez sitting beside him on the training ground when he had wanted to quit. He remembered her quiet voice saying, "You have one more in you. You always have one more," kept firing. The Kethra commander watched the battle from behind his lines. His name was Vrex, and he had led 100 successful raids. He had never seen anything like this. The Valanthi should have collapsed by now. They should have broken and fled. Instead, they were holding and his soldiers were dying. He ordered a second wave forward, then a third. Each wave pushed closer to the Valanthi line, but each wave lost soldiers in the process. The defenders were being pushed back, slowly, step by step. But they were not running. 1 hour into the battle, the Valanthi had lost 17 soldiers. The Kethra had lost 43. Lord Selix fought in the center of the line, his ceremonial blade flashing in close combat. He had not touched the weapon in decades except for parades. Now he used it to defend his soldiers, stepping forward when the enemy got too close. Pushing them back with strength he had not known he possessed, a Kethra soldier broke through the line and lunged at him. Selix moved without thinking, his body responding with reflexes built through months of training. He sidestepped the attack, brought his blade down on the enemy's arm, and kicked the wounded Kethra back into its companions. "Hold the line," he shouted. His voice did not shake. His hands did not tremble. "Remember what you are. Remember what you have become." The soldiers heard him and fought harder. Vasquez reached his position, bleeding from 3 wounds now, but still moving. She had taken a piece of shrapnel in her leg, a burn across her back, and a deep cut on her forearm. Any one of these wounds would have stopped a Valanthi soldier 3 months ago. She treated them as minor inconveniences. "They are bringing up their commander," she said, pointing to movement behind the Kethra lines. "If we can take him out, they might retreat." "That is a very large if," Selix replied. "Large ifs are the only kind worth fighting for." The Kethra commander Vrex strode forward. He was even bigger than his soldiers, his armor decorated with marks of his many victories. He looked at the Valanthi line with open contempt. "Surrender now," he boomed, his voice amplified by his helmet. "You have fought well for creatures of your kind. But this ends only one way. Lay down your weapons, and we will be merciful."
Ow.
No one moved. No one spoke. Vrex laughed. "Very well. You will die as you lived, weak and foolish. He charged the line directly, his massive form crashing through the defensive barrier. Soldiers scattered. Weapons fired but bounced off his heavy armor. He was unstoppable, a force of nature. Heading straight for Lord Sellex, he did not see Private Kethvos step into his path. Kethvos was small by Valenthi standards. He had been the weakest soldier in the Silk Caste. He had broken his arm doing a single push-up. By every measure, he had no business standing in front of a Kethra commander who had killed hundreds, but he had learned something over 3 months of training. He had learned that strength was not about size. It was not about natural ability. It was about refusing to stop. Vrex swung a massive fist at the small Valanthi. Kethvos ducked under it, moving faster than he had ever moved before. He remembered every drill, every exercise, every time Vasquez had pushed him past his limits. His body knew what to do, even when his mind was screaming in terror. He struck at the gaps in the commander's armor. Once, twice, 3 times. Each blow was precise, targeting the joints where protection was weakest. Vrex roared in pain and surprise. He grabbed at Kethvos, but the smaller soldier was already moving. Rolling away, coming up in a fighting stance that Vasquez had taught them in week 6. "You are nothing," Vrex bellowed. A weak little creature from a weak little world. Kethvos did not respond. He did not have the breath for words. He just kept moving, kept striking, kept refusing to stop. Other soldiers saw what was happening. They saw their weakest members standing against the enemy's strongest warrior. They saw him take hits that should have killed him and get back up. They saw him embody everything Vasquez had taught them about endurance and will. They rallied the Valanthi. Lines surged forward for the first time in the battle. They pushed into the Kethra ranks, fighting with a ferocity that their ancestors had never known. They ignored wounds. They ignored exhaustion. They remembered that pain was just information. And right now the information was telling them they were still alive. Vrex finally managed to grab Kethvos, lifting the small soldier off the ground. His grip was crushing. Kethvos felt his ribs creak under the pressure. "You should have surrendered," the commander snarled. Kethvos looked into the Kethro's burning eyes. He thought about every morning run, every push-up, every time he had wanted to quit and had not. "I have one more in me," he whispered. He drove his blade into the gap between the commander's helmet and armor. Vrex screamed. His grip loosened. Kethvos fell to the ground, gasping for air. When he looked up, the Kethra commander was staggering backward, wounded badly, bleeding from his neck. His soldiers saw their leader fall and stopped their advance. Vasquez's voice rang out across the battlefield. "Push them back, now. Everything you have." The Valanthi pushed. The Kethra, seeing their commander wounded and their losses mounting, began to retreat, first in small groups, then in larger ones. Until finally, the entire strike force was pulling back to their landing craft 2 hours after the battle began. The Kethra left the agricultural moon. They would return to their command and report something that had never happened before. They had been beaten by Valanthi. Lord Sellex found Vasquez treating the wounded near the communications array. She was covered in blood, most of it her own, but she was still working, still helping, still refusing to stop. "Master Sergeant," he said formally, "I owe you an apology." She looked up from her work. "No apology needed, Commander. You just needed to learn what you were capable of." Nearby, Kethvos lay on a medical stretcher. His ribs were broken. His body was covered in bruises. He was smiling. "I did it," he whispered. "I did not run." Vasquez limped over to him and squeezed his hand. "No, you did not. You never have to wonder again what you are made of. Now you know." He closed all 4 eyes and slept, dreaming of marathons and salmon and a small human who had taught him to be strong. 6 months passed. Quickly after the battle, the Valanthi Empire celebrated their victory on the agricultural moon as the beginning of a new era. Songs were written about the defense. Artists created paintings of the Silk Caste standing firm against the Kethra charge. Children played games where they pretended to be soldiers who did not run. But the real changes happened quietly. Away from the celebrations, military units across the Empire adopted the training methods that Vasquez had created. Soldiers who had never run more than a few steps now completed morning marches. Warriors who had fainted at minor wounds now trained in realistic combat simulations. The phrase Vasquez Standard spread from the military to civilian life. Schools introduced physical education programs. Businesses encouraged morning exercise. The idea that Valenthi Bodies could be strong had become a cultural movement. Private Kethvos recovered from his injuries and was promoted to squad leader. It's the youngest in Valenthi's history. His broken ribs healed stronger than before. His story spread throughout the Empire. The tale of the weakest soldier who had faced the enemy commander and refused to fall. Young Valenthia looked up to him not because he had been naturally talented, but because he had become something through hard work and will. Lord Selix became a strong voice for military reform. He argued that tradition was important, but survival was more important. He pushed for new equipment, new tactics, and more human advisors. The nobles who had once criticized Vasquez now competed to have their children trained by humans. And through it all, Vasquez continued training. She did not rest after the battle. She did not slow down. There were more soldiers to prepare, more lessons to teach, more limits to push. She trained in the mornings, reviewed tactics in the afternoons, and studied Valenthi physiology in the evenings. She was building something that would last long after she was gone. On the last day of her contract, the Emperor summoned her to the throne room once more. The Crystal Hall was filled with nobles, military leaders, and government officials. The 100 soldiers of the Silk Caste stood in perfect formation, their scales gleaming with health and strength. They looked nothing like the trembling warriors who had greeted her 6 months ago. The Emperor rose from his throne. This was unusual. Emperors did not stand for anyone. Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez, he said, his voice filling the vast chamber. You came to us through a mistake. We asked for gentle guidance and received something very different. Many of us were angry. Many of us wanted you gone. We believed you did not understand our people. He paused, looking at the assembled soldiers. We were wrong. You understood us better than we understood ourselves. You saw strength where we saw weakness. You saw potential where we saw limits. You taught our soldiers not just how to fight, but how to believe in themselves. For this, we offer you our highest honor. The servant brought forward a tray holding various items. There was a title of nobility, granting her lands and income. There was an offer of Valenthi citizenship, making her legally a member of the Empire. There was a position command of the entire military training apparatus, with authority second only to the Emperor himself. Vasquez listened to each offer carefully. Then she politely declined them all. The court murmured in shock. No one had ever refused the Emperor's gifts. Your Majesty, she said calmly, I am honored beyond words. But I must refuse. I am a trainer. My job is to make myself unnecessary. These soldiers do not need me anymore. They know what they are capable of. They will pass this knowledge to the next generation and the next. That is how survival works. That is how species become strong. The Emperor studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, something rare and precious. You are truly not like other creatures we have met, he said. But we cannot let you leave with nothing. Choose something. Anything. It will be yours. Vasquez thought about this. Then she pointed to a small crystal pendant that a servant was wearing. It was a traditional Valanthi gift of respect, given between friends. That, she said. That is enough. The servant removed a pendant and brought it to her. She held it up to the light, watching the 3 suns scatter rainbows through its crystalline structure. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will remember your people always. The next morning, the entire Silk Caste assembled at the spaceport. They did not stand in formal military formation. They crowded together like family, pushing and jostling to get close to the boarding ramp. Vasquez walked through them slowly, speaking to each soldier she passed. She remembered all their names. She remembered their struggles and their victories. She remembered who had wanted to quit on day 1 and who had cried during the first night drill. She remembered everything. Kethvos pushed to the front. His squad leader insignia gleamed on his chest. His scales were bright and healthy. He stood straight and tall, nothing like the trembling young soldier who had broken his arm doing a push-up. "Master Sergeant," he said, struggling with human customs. He had practiced this speech many times. "Will you return?" Vasquez smiled. It was a warm smile, full of pride and affection. "Maybe someday. But you will not need me if I do." She reached out and clasped his shoulder, feeling the strong muscles beneath his scales. "Remember what you learned. Pain is just information. Fear is just a feeling. And you always have one more in you. Always." Kethvos felt tears forming in his eyes. Valanthi did not cry often. It was considered a sign of weakness. But he had learned that showing emotion was not weakness. Hiding from truth was weakness. "I will remember," he said. "I will teach others. That is all I ask." She released his shoulder and looked at the crowd of soldiers. "That is all I ask of any of you. Pass it on. Make your children stronger than you. Make your grandchildren stronger than them. In 100 years, the galaxy will know that Valanthi are not to be underestimated." She turned and walked up the boarding ramp. At the top, she paused and looked back one last time. "It was an honor," she said simply. Then she was gone. 3 years later, the Valanthi Empire applied to join the Galactic Defense Coalition. The coalition was an alliance of the strongest species in the galaxy, united against threats to interstellar peace. Membership required passing strict military evaluations. The Valanthi passed every test. The evaluators noted something strange in their report. The Valanthi soldiers moved differently than any Valanthi they had seen before. They were stronger, faster, more resilient. They did not break under pressure. They did not surrender when things got difficult. They had a look in their eyes that the evaluators recognized from only one other species in the galaxy. They looked like humans. The Valanthi application was approved with a special notation. Their military had been evaluated and certified to Vasquez's standard. The term spread across 12 star systems. It came to mean more than just physical ability. It meant the willingness to push past assumed limits. It meant finding strength where none seemed to exist. It meant understanding that the body could endure far more than the mind believed. Human trainers became the most requested specialists in the galaxy. Every species wanted what the Valanthi had found. Every military wanted to know the secrets of the Deathworlders who could run for hours, fight through pain, and simply refuse to stop. And somewhere, on a transport ship heading toward a distant world, Elena Vasquez read the news on her datapad. She saw that Vasquez's standard had become an official term. She saw that Kethvos had been promoted again, now a commander in his own right. She saw that the Valanthi had become something their ancestors would never have recognized. She allowed herself a small moment of pride, just a small one. There was no time for more. She pulled up the file on her new assignment. A species called the Glorvani. They communicated through bioluminescent patterns. They considered standing upright to be dangerously strenuous. They had requested a gentle human advisor to help with some minor fitness improvements. Vasquez smiled that smile again. The one that was not comforting. The one that promised change. She had work to do, far away. On the Valanthi homeworld, Kethvos stood before a new class of recruits. They were young and soft and scared, just as he had been. They looked at him with wide eyes, wondering what impossible things he would demand of them. He remembered his first day. He remembered believing he could not do a single push-up. He remembered Vasquez sitting beside him when he wanted to quit, her quiet voice saying words that had changed his life. "I know you are afraid," he told the recruits. "I was afraid too. I was the weakest soldier in my class. I broke my arm on the first day. But I learned something important. The limits you believe in are not real. They are just stories you tell yourself. And today, we start writing a new story." He paused, looking at their uncertain faces. "We run," he said. Now, and they ran. The legacy continued.